and get started, everybody. Thank you for being here. Today we're going to talk about staying connected, ways to be in an emotionally intelligent relationship. My name is Talia Loredo, and I am a couples counselor and sex therapist here with Eden's Counseling Group. So we're just going to be going through this month's focus on wellness. Next slide, please. Okay, so we currently have your cameras turned off and all of you are muted because we are going to be recording this and uploading it to YouTube. So we just want to maintain everybody's privacy. So please keep your questions and your comments to the chat box, and then we will definitely have time at the end of the presentation for me to just answer some questions that you all have put in there, but also feel free to use your emojis to just react and follow along throughout the meeting. We have these every month, I believe on the second Thursday of each month from 7 to 8, and we cover a bunch of different topics. But as I'm a couples counselor, we're going to be talking about relationships today. Okay, next slide. Okay, so first we're going to be talking about why are we here? So we want to be in an emotionally intelligent relationship. We're kind of going to be identifying what is that? What is emotionally intelligent relationship? What is required, and what are we kind of working towards whenever we're talking about these skills and tools that we're going to be learning about. We're going to be identifying tools for increasing connection, identifying tools for communicating, identifying barriers for communication, and identifying what to do instead. So we're also going to spend a good portion of time on communication because communication can be a means to enhance connection or also a means to be a barrier for connection. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of doing that properly in order to build strong relationships. Next slide. Okay, so what is an emotionally intelligent relationship and why is it important to have one? So an emotionally intelligent relationship is one that is self-aware, where both parties are kind of self-aware of their areas of growth, of their areas of strength, and with awareness comes the ability to identify what we need to work on and what we need to move towards, right? So an emotionally intelligent relationship, each person cares about where they're at and cares about the things that they need to work on in order to move towards the ideal relationship and goal that they have in mind. So awareness is a really big part in all of that. An emotionally intelligent relationship is one that has empathy, and we're going to talk more about empathy later on in the presentation and really kind of get into how we can communicate empathy with our partner. An emotionally intelligent relationship is one that prioritizes connection. So we're going to kind of learn about the function of a relationship and what is the purpose of even being in one, and how connection is probably the most important function in one. And so just talking more about connection. And emotionally intelligent relationship is one that has effective communication. So why have an emotionally intelligent relationship? Why be in a relationship at all? So we are social creatures, and we are people that need others, need a partner in order to thrive in this world. So a secure connection to a loved one is one that's empowering. Okay, so whether that is a partner, whether that is other people in our lives, relationships are very powerful, and they give us the capability to be explorative and curious in the world. So I know this sounds kind of strange, but an adult relationship mimics the love between a mother and child whenever they're younger. Okay, so attachment is very, very important. Just like whenever you're younger, you thrive or do not thrive based on the relationship that you have with your mother and the secure attachment that is present there. And the same is true whenever you're an adult, except that person often changes to be your romantic partner, but it can also be other people in your life. So it's really important that whenever you are in a relationship, in a romantic relationship, that it is one that is secure and strong, because it is that point of secure connection in your life to where you can do other things and go out in the world and thrive. It's a fact that people that are in relationships often live longer because they kind of have that safe and trusting environment that they can kind of go to, that home base, that safe place. Whenever we feel safely connected to others, we understand ourselves more, like ourselves better, and we can be curious. So we have the ability to kind of self-evaluate whenever we are in a relationship and kind of figuring out how to make things work together. We like ourselves better. It is a place where we can kind of grow in our confidence. And again, we can be curious because we have that safe place, that safe haven with our partner. We have the ability to be curious and explorative in other areas. And so those are just kind of some of the functions of a relationship and why they're so important and why it's important for it to be emotionally intelligent. The more secure that we are in our relationships, the more independent that we can be in other ways. And we are better at seeking support and better at giving it whenever we are in emotionally intelligent relationships. If we have that secure attachment, we have a person that we can securely ask for help. We have a person that we can describe our vulnerabilities, fears, needs, and wants with. And so it's easier to allow ourselves to ask for that help and also to be able to give somebody the space to give that help as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to be talking about ways to integrate connection into your relationship, things that maybe will work for you if you're really busy and just trying to figure out ways in which you can enhance that intimacy. And then we're also going to talk about the 5 love languages and just kind of ways to utilize that. But overall, the first one is dates. That one's pretty straightforward. Another one is finding a shared hobby. Being able to do activities with your partner can be really helpful. You know, let's just say that you're really, really busy and you're trying to make sure that you're getting your workouts in throughout the week. And then you're also wanting to make sure that you can spend some time with your loved one. Being able to find a hobby together, join a sport together, work out together, that's a way to kind of check off 2 different aspects of your wellness, where you're spending time with your partner and you're also getting some exercise in. And also just kind of nurturing your own interest and the interest that you have in your relationship. Having that place to share something together and explore it together. Schedule weekly time together. So putting it in your calendars ahead of time. Um, Making time with your partner and prioritizing that connection is just as important as going to the gym, attending a work meeting, eating healthy foods. It's just as important to your health of yourself, your partner, and your relationship. So put it in your calendars, treat it like a priority, and don't budge on it because it is something that you have committed to, you know, so be very intentional about setting time aside for you and your partner. We're going to talk more about going for walks in the next slide, but that's something that I highly recommend with a lot of my clients is walking can be very peaceful. It can be very rhythmic. And so it's a really good place for you to kind of have that space to discuss and have open conversations with your partner. Dream together and discuss the future, you know, create plans together, hope and dream and aspire to new things and figure out ways in which you can help each other to move towards your goals that you have created on an individual level and also on an interpersonal level. Explore a book or podcast together to talk about, again, just kind of sharing in each other's interest and ideas and being able to have things to kind of share about. Stretch yourself if your partner wants to try something new. Don't automatically say no. You know, be willing to be open and be curious and explore with your partner, even if it's something that may not appeal to you right away. You know, it's all about compromise, both of you being able to appeal to both of your interests and try something new for the other person. Again, you know, in a secure relationship, it's that ability to be open and curious and explorative. And so with that, you know, kind of maintain those values. Celebrate successes together, physical intimacy. We're going to talk more about communication, but with physical intimacy, make sure that you're kind of integrating it, figuring out what works for you. And with physical intimacy, it can be a topic that can feel very personal and vulnerable. So with working on your communication, you'll be able to feel more confident in having sexual conversations and figuring out what's going to work for you and your partner and your relationship. And limit distractions whenever you're together, you know, just like if you were treating your time with your partner like a work meeting or doing something important like going to the gym, making sure that that time is very intentional and that you're holding space and time for your partner to where they really, really feel like a priority. And the 5 love languages. So I'm sure many people have heard of the 5 love languages: physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, gift giving, and acts of service. I linked an assessment so you can figure out your love language at the end of this presentation. So hopefully that will be handed out, but we'll make sure to get that to you. And I encourage you to use that as a tool to explore with your partner what their love language is, what yours is, and how you can kind of bridge the gap and make sure that you're being in tune with each other's needs in that way. The way that you conceptualize love and maybe want to receive love can vary from how you give love, and really being able to be flexible in that way. And also having further conversations of what each of these look like to you. You know, if you and your partner have different ideas of what acts of service mean, being able to talk about that so that they can be in tune with your love language and what that looks like for you. Next slide, please. Love maps, being intimately familiar with each other's worlds. So love maps are very important. They're talked about by Dr. John Gottman, and he specializes in helping couples in a multitude of ways. But love maps is basically you getting a clearer picture of your partner, their story, their history, who they are, really being able to be in tune with all of that information about each other. And you may be thinking, you know, with my partner, I know a lot of information about them, but this is getting into the deeper stuff that maybe you wouldn't think to ask, and also keeping this information updated, you know, being in tune with what your partner's day looks like, what they're doing, what their hobbies are, how they like to spend their evenings, and also just their histories and ideas and thoughts that they have. So really important to be able to be in tune with each other and have an idea of who this person is and showing interest in that. We're going to show some examples of love maps in the next slide, but this is the ways in which it can be beneficial. It can be beneficial with coping with stress. From knowledge comes not just love, but how to weather storms. Maybe you're having a conversation and you notice that your partner's attitude changes and like a soft spot has came up for them in that conversation. Having a clear idea of who your partner is and what their vulnerabilities are, fears, needs, wants, you'll be able to kind of make the connection of, oh, this is what's coming up for them in this moment. So with knowledge comes the ability to know how to work with your partner and have an understanding of what's really going on for them in times of, you know, more positive emotions and also in times of more negative emotions as well. Overcoming negative sentiment override. So negative sentiment override is essentially times when negative interactions are outweighing positive ones. So a lot of times I have couples coming into my office and they really want to work on their relationship, but they have a sense of hopelessness, or they don't feel very hopeful for their relationship because they're stuck in negative sentiment override, where they haven't had many positive experiences, or it seems like the negative experiences are outweighing the positive ones. Love maps can give us the opportunity to incorporate more connection into our relationship to where we are increasing those positive interactions. Think of your relationship like a piggy bank. It's not just about not taking money out, but it's also about putting money into it. So just thinking about your relationship in that way. And by incorporating love maps and asking each other questions and working on your connection, you're increasing those positive interactions. And increasing confidence. So making room for conversations that are not stressful. So stressful ones are not as intimidating. With these love maps and having these conversations and having questions that you kind of ask each other and answering and learning about each other, you are learning how to have conversations that have depth to them, but they aren't so intimidating. They aren't stressful. They're not personal. They're not a place where you are there to disagree. You're just there to kind of learn about each other and be able to find out that you can connect in this way. So that way, whenever maybe more high stress conversations come up, you feel more capable in being able to tackle that with your partner because you're already putting all of that communication into practice. And so I mentioned in the last slide, going on walks are very helpful. That's whenever I recommend putting this into practice, you know, going on a walk, being able to have questions that you and your partner can ask from each other. Again, you know, walks are very peaceful, they're very rhythmic. It's easier to kind of open up and explore with our partner. Even the fact that you're not directly looking at each other can make the conversation feel more casual and relaxed to where you're more likely to be open with each other. And so that's a really good way to put that into practice. I also linked a bunch of questions at the end of this presentation, like just different games that you can buy to where you know which questions to ask your partner. That way, if you're needing some ideas, then you can have that. Next slide, please. And so I want you to take just a couple of minutes to reflect. So these are examples of what questions would be asked of each of you in doing a love maps exercise. So take a minute to just kind of look at these questions and see how many of them you can answer about your partner. Or maybe later on, you can see how many questions that your partner can answer about you. That kind of gives you an idea of where your love map is and how much you're really in tune and how much you know about your partner. And there's always, a million more questions that you can kind of ask each other. And there's a lot of resources out there for doing that. But just take a couple minutes to just go through there and see, what the potential is and what you can learn about each other. Okay, hopefully that gave you some kind of idea into how strong your love map is for your person. And, maybe some other things that you can kind of discover about your partner. No matter how long that you have been together, there's always more ways in which you can get to know your person. And it's, really important for kind of helping each other feel seen and recognized and noticed. And then there's a lot of benefits that kind of come along with that in regards to your connection. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to get into talking about communication. Okay, so what is this thing called communication and what are the goals behind it? A lot of question that I kind of get, or sorry, an answer that I get a lot of the time in terms of goals of communication is problem solving. And that is true, with communicating, you're able to often identify resolutions for issues that come up. But communication is a lot more than that. And we want to make sure that we have a clear picture of, what the point of communication is so we can figure out how to make it work for building connection in the relationship. Communication is vital for building strong connections. So effective communication is communication that is safe, open, and allows each of the partners in the room to explore their own thoughts and desires. They're able to kind of explore that with each other, and they're able to have that open system to where they can discuss that together. So goals of communication is providing empathy for each other, giving you and your partner a safe space to process emotions and stressors, and this might be stressors that come up within the relationship and stressors that come up outside of the relationship. Again, the function of a relationship is to have a safe space within your daily life with handling stressors with your partner. So allowing that space so that your partner, if they have a bad day at work, if they're having family issues, if they're experiencing loss or health scares, that they're able to come back to their safe space, which is with their partner, and process their emotions and just be able to kind of recuperate in that way with their partner. So empathy is very important. Again, we're going to talk more about that in the coming slides. Also, understanding each other overall. I put understanding fears because underneath a lot of things that come up in relationships is fears, but just understanding each other overall, being able to show your partner that they are seen. Identifying raw spots together so you can identify needs and wants and have something to work together. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about barriers to communication and then what to do instead. Next slide. So first, we're going to be talking about the window of tolerance. And the importance of taking breaks. And this is kind of our way of figuring out, when is the time to have conversations and when is the time where maybe it's not the best idea to have a conversation, and there is a correct answer for that. So the window of tolerance is an area where you are emotionally regulated. It's whenever you are able to think clearly, have productive conversations, emotionally process things. It's an area where you're probably functioning at your best level, mentally speaking. But sometimes in relationships, if issues come up or just stressors in everyday life, emotions often get involved and we can exit our window of tolerance. And you can go one of two directions. You can go into hyperarousal. That is a little bit more obvious. Like it can look like anger, anxiety. Maybe you're noticing that your pulse is rising or you're breathing a little bit heavier. Maybe voices are raising in volume, maybe it looks a little bit more reactive, okay? And that just feels like somebody's restless in a sense, you know, they're just really feeling the emotions that are kind of coming up for them. But another time, whenever people are getting emotionally dysregulated, it can also look like hypoarousal, which is a little bit less obvious, and that's in the bottom portion. That can look like somebody withdrawing, avoiding, maybe getting defensive, maybe feeling like they're going numb, things like that. And the same thing is happening for both areas. A person is just getting emotionally overwhelmed, but it can often look very different. Okay. And so maybe just kind of taking some time to think about how this presents for you. Think about a time whenever you were stressed or you were overwhelmed. What was really going on for you? What were you noticing that was changing in your body? How were your thoughts changing? How were your emotions changing? What was kind of coming up for you in that moment? Um, and it's really important to kind of be aware of this because it's important to normalize that whenever our emotions get too heavy, we may be introducing new hormones into our bloodstream, and that can have a physiological effect on us. It can have a physiological effect on how we can process emotions, think. It can change the way that we interpret different things from our partner. And so it's important to kind of realizing whenever we're exiting this window of tolerance. Because in those areas is whenever communication can go from being helpful to harmful. So whenever you're looking at the interaction that you're having with your partner, whenever things are getting heated, think, is this helpful or is this harmful? Are we getting into this area where we could actually be breaking down our connection? We can actually not be providing a safe space for each other? Or does this still feel productive and does this still feel helpful? Am I able to provide that safe space? So just being aware of what that looks like for you. And whenever you are exiting, kind of normalizing the emotional experience that you're having and allowing yourself to take breaks, giving yourself permission to take breaks. So whenever you're outside of your window of tolerance and these things are kind of coming up for you, being able to tell your partner, hey, you know, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now. I think that I'm outside of my window of tolerance. Something else that you can say is I'm feeling flooded. That term kind of comes from being flooded with hormones or an emotional experience. Being able to say that and tell them this conversation is important to me, but I don't want our conversation or our communication to become harmful. So I think that we need to take a break. And I get a lot of clients that say, you know, that feels like abandonment. That feels like avoiding the conversation, brushing it under the rug, ignoring it. And my suggestion is whenever you're taking that break, identify a specific time for whenever you're going to come back to the conversation. Typically, it takes you about an hour to come back into your window, maybe a little bit longer for some people. But telling your partner whenever you're taking these breaks, let's come back to this conversation in an hour, or let's come back to it after dinner. Giving a concrete time, so you're letting your partner know, I'm not abandoning you, I'm not leaving this conversation, I'm not ignoring this. This is important, but our communication needs to be helpful right now. And it's okay to get emotionally dysregulated sometimes, you know, things can kind of just come up, and just giving yourself permission to feel those emotions first and then maybe think about what you want to share after that. So also paying attention that whenever you're taking these breaks, how are you spending that break? You should be focusing on mindfulness, breath work, grounding, maybe go for a run or go for a walk. Find some way to um, de-escalate and regulate your emotions so that way you can come back and put your best foot forward with your partner. Next slide, please. Okay, next we're going to be talking about the four horsemen. and also their antidotes. So the four horsemen is criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And these are essentially just maladaptive behaviors that can kind of come up whenever we're communicating. And we need to be aware whenever they're coming up so we can find a way to communicate instead. So these are very big barriers to communication and very big barriers to communicating. But oftentimes we feel like we need to use them whenever we are discussing with our partners. So criticism and contempt kind of overlap, but it essentially means just verbally attacking somebody's personality or character. So a good example is you're a slob versus I'm frustrated that the dishes aren't getting done. You know, you're saying something directly about that person and who they are. That's what criticism can look like. And contempt is kind of the same thing, but in a sense, it's you looking down on your partner, looking down on that person. And so there's a tone of like authority with contempt. Defensiveness is, you know, not taking accountability, victimizing yourself, just kind of giving explanations and not really sitting with your partner's emotion. And stonewalling is withdrawing from the conversation to avoid conflict, or also intentionally ignoring your partner whenever things feel a little bit more uncomfortable for you. And so whenever you think back to the window of tolerance and you think about hyperarousal and hypoarousal, criticism and contempt and sometimes defensiveness can come up more with hyperarousal, and stonewalling and defensiveness can come up more with hypoarousal. So that's why it's kind of important to be aware whenever you're exiting your window, because that's whenever these behaviors are more likely to come up. And if you're looking at this and you're noticing, hey, you know, sometimes I do engage in some of those behaviors, maybe taking the time to ask yourself, you know, what is the function behind me trying to use this form of communication? There's a reason that you feel like that's going to work in the moment. Being able to really explore with yourself and figure out, you know, what am I trying to get out of this? So you can actually identify the true need and the true want and try to figure out a different way to approach that need and that want that maybe can work better for your relationship. The truth of the matter is that these four forms of communication don't work in a relationship. They often lead to both partners getting further and further apart from each other and really just putting a dent on their connection. And so being able to kind of come with it to terms with the fact that like these don't work, even though in the moment they may feel like they will work. And really just asking yourself, where is this coming from? Why does this feel like this would be functional right now? Also taking the time to ask yourself, you know, how are these not working? How are they harming me, my partner, and my relationship? You know, not only are they harming the relationship and your partner, but they're also harming yourself in some way, really being able to kind of explore that with yourself and figure out what's really, really happening here. And another way in which these kind of drive partners further and further apart is that criticism and contempt are often in opposition of defensiveness and stonewalling. So think about somebody that's being critical, that's going to make the person that's stonewalling stonewall even more. And then the person that's stonewalling they're going to make the person that's critical be critical even more. So it's important to kind of just like get stuck out of that, because whenever you are in this pattern of communication, it looks like you and your partner are on opposing sides. You know, we want to kind of acknowledge whenever that is the room, you know, are you viewing me as the enemy, or are you viewing me as your partner? And with these forms of communication, it's really easy to look at each other like the enemy more than anything. And that's a really big thing that we want to avoid. Next slide, please. Okay, identifying needs and wants. So that's another good point of why we need to implement the window of tolerance and kind of having awareness whenever we're exiting our window. A lot of times whenever people are emotionally flooded, they can't identify their needs and their wants. And so they're not able to communicate that to their partner. So that's why it's good to kind of be in a good headspace where you can really ask yourself, you know, what's going on for me right now? What thoughts, emotions are coming up for me, and how can I ask for what I'm needing right now? So awareness is very important. Being in tune with your needs allows you to be able to know what to ask for from your partner. And being in tune with your partner's needs allows you to respond appropriately. So really being able to identify needs and wants, it kind of takes some practice, but let's think of the example with the partner wanting the dishes to be clean, right? So they might come across and say, oh, like, you're a slob. Really, they're frustrated that the dishes aren't clean. If they take a moment and kind of slow down, they're like, what's really going on for me right now? Why do I want to use criticism right now? Why does this feel so heavy? Why do I feel emotionally dysregulated? Oh, I have this need of things being fair in the household, me being equal to my partner. That's what the need would be: fairness, equality, things like that. So really being able to kind of slow down the conversation, check in with yourself, and find out what really is missing for you underneath that. That's a good question to ask yourself whenever these emotions are coming up. What is missing? What is feeling like it's not appropriate right now? And you know, you kind of need to be in a good headspace to conceptualize things in that way. Another example of that is arguments about money could be an underlying need to feel financially secure. So sometimes, you know, maybe disagreements will come up in the relationship where they look a little bit, they don't look serious, or it feels like your reaction isn't aligned with the situation at hand. That's probably because there's a need or a fear of vulnerability underneath that conversation that is really hitting a soft spot for you. So that's whenever love maps become important as well, you know, being aware of those raw spots are for yourself and also for your partner. This requires having a good foundation in the relationship where both parties feel emotionally safe enough to share. Yeah, so with the negative sentiment override, you know, having positive interactions overcome the negative interactions. Whenever your partner is sharing with you their needs, their wants, their vulnerabilities, make sure that you are providing the right space for them, which we're going to talk about on the next coming slides, providing that right space so that you're reinforcing the idea that they are safe with you and that they can share these things. Sometimes relationship wounds can come up if one partner is trying to share their needs, their wants, their fears, their vulnerabilities, and their partner isn't being receptive to that. You're teaching your partner, you're not safe here. You're not safe to talk to me about these key things. So we need to make sure that we are providing that safe space for them so that they feel that they can share in that way. Consequences of not being able to identify your needs and your wants, and then therefore not being able to share with your partner, is resentment. You know, everybody has needs and wants. Everybody has expectations. It's just really important to be aware of them, because if you try to ignore it and they don't get met, then that leads to resentment in the conversation and in the relationship, and probably bigger issues later on. Next slide, please. So now we're going to be talking about empathy. This slide is going to kind of go over what empathy should look like. And then the next slide is going to go over some empathy traps, or ways that people are trying to communicate empathy, but maybe it's just not hitting the right spot. Giving you and your partner the right space to communicate. So empathy looks like being able to see their world from their perspective, being able to get in their shoes. That can be incredibly difficult if you two feel like you're in opposing positions, if you're already outside of that window of tolerance, if you're already utilizing the four horsemen. It's really easy to get into that mindset where we're enemies. So it's going to be that much harder to see their perspective. It's going to really be a lot harder to kind of get in that place where you can kind of visualize that. So that's why it's important to kind of catch the window of tolerance early on, because in that functional area, in that window of tolerance, it's a lot easier to kind of be able to do that. Empathy means not having any judgment, having a safe space, not really critiquing or arguing with anybody's feelings or thoughts or emotions, just really being able to kind of sit in it with them, and not wanting to change whatever they are thinking or feeling or expressing. Understanding your partner's feelings also means getting in touch with your own emotions. Part of empathy is being able to get in their shoes and experience that emotion with them. You know, whenever you're seeing that they are feeling some type of hurt, being able to get in touch with that side, with that part of yourself as well, so that you can experience it with them. A very powerful thing that we can do with each other whenever expressing empathy is just saying me too, just finding something to kind of relate to and being able to sit in that emotion with them. Um, Communicate understanding before trying to problem solve or critique or argue in any form or fashion. Acknowledge what your partner is sharing before anything else. And just putting that into practice is going to set your conversations up to be a lot more helpful, because we need to listen first and then talk after. And I've had couples come in where, one partner says, sometimes my partner shares something really heavy and I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know how to comfort them. And with empathy, sometimes we just need to not talk. Sometimes we don't have solutions and our partner isn't something to be fixed. And we just need to see them, be there with them, notice them, and just try to understand and sit with them in that emotion. And if you're too focused on how you're going to respond to whatever they're sharing, then you're probably not understanding what they're sharing. You can't understand if you're thinking how to respond the whole time, or you're not listening if you're thinking about how to respond the whole time. Sometimes you just need to say, that's really difficult, that's tough, and just sit there and be there with them through that. If any of these steps of empathy, seeing the world, getting in their shoes, not offering judgment, understanding their feelings, or communicating understanding seems really difficult, or like you're not able to do that in that moment, then that may be that you're outside of your window of tolerance. Because whenever you're in that window of tolerance, it's a lot easier to kind of be able to do these things. And lastly, if emotions are involved, you cannot problem solve without first providing empathy. So we're going to get more into that in the next slide, but acknowledge first before anything else. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one talks about empathy traps. And I think the biggest thing here to kind of take away from this is that your partner is not something to be fixed. We are all humans that experience varying stressors, emotions, and feelings. And whenever we are trying to communicate empathy, we need to just be there with our partner, not try to change their experience, change their emotional experience. Part of loving somebody is accepting them, all facets of them, including all of the range of emotions that they experience. Okay. So some traps, and people can have the best of intentions whenever they're using these, is even worse, look on the bright side, or problem solving. So even worse is like, your problem could be way worse. It could look like this instead of this. Or look on the bright side. At least you don't have to ... Or problem solving. How can we fix this? Maybe your partner comes up to you and they're like, I had such a stressful day at work. My boss is putting a lot of stress on me. Oh, maybe you should just talk to your boss. These can sound very dismissive. And at the end of the day, your partner is not something to be fixed. Whenever they are having a emotion, they need you to listen first before anything else. Problem solving implies that, hey, I'm uncomfortable with the emotion that you're experiencing, so I'm going to offer a solution so that you don't feel that anymore, so that I'm not uncomfortable anymore. Sometimes we just need to sit in it together and accept that things are hard. And then oftentimes we can get into problem solving after that. It definitely depends on the situation, but most of the time, whenever emotions are involved, we kind of need to address that first before we get into problem solving. And there's a function behind experiencing emotions. Emotions provide us with a sense of direction. So allowing your partner to fully process what they're feeling will help the both of you identify solutions. Next slide, please. And putting all of that together, the 3 C's: catch it, check it, change it. So catch it means identifying times whenever communication is harmful instead of helpful. So asking yourself, am I outside my window of tolerance? Am I using one of the 4 horsemen? Taking a break if necessary so that you can prevent the conversation from becoming maladaptive. Check it. Being able to ask yourself, what's really going on for me right now? What am I needing? What am I wanting? And, what about this do I need to share with my partner to actually get what I'm needing and wanting? and that comes down to the identifying the needs and the wants and the feelings part. And then change it, incorporating empathy and avoiding empathy traps, utilizing effective communication, involving concise thoughts, empathy, and active listening. So just kind of being able to go through those 3 steps that can really transform your communication and make it to where it can enhance your connection. Next slide, please. And here are some resources that I have, recommended reads and games. The first one is Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson. That one gets into more about the attachment that goes on in romantic relationships and how important it is to have a secure and safe space with our partners. The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work by John Gottman and Nan Silver. That one provides more tools, goes more in depth about love maps and the 4 horsemen. And then the 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. I think that'd be really cool and beneficial to explore together with your partner. Again, kind of asking each other questions of, how do you conceptualize love and how can I meet those needs? And then these 2 games are cards that have a bunch of questions that you can ask each other in order to build your love maps. That's the 5 Languages assessment. And then from Target, I found a book. It's 3,000 questions about me. I actually have it myself, but it'd be really cool to kind of use those questions in order to ask you and to ask your partner whenever you're building your love maps as well. Next slide. Okay, and that about wraps it up. Are there any questions? Any thoughts? Just go ahead and put them in the chat. Yes, I do believe that we will be sharing this on YouTube. And then you'll have, I'll find a way to put the resources like on a doc or something so we can share it with all of you. Okay, any more questions or thoughts before we wrap up? Ray, how do you manage really differing perspectives? Does radical acceptance have space here? Do you mean in terms of 2 different partners have radically different perspectives? Yeah, I think that comes down to further exploration with each couple, but oftentimes whenever partners feel very passionate about a specific idea or thing, it's probably because there's an underlying need or want or fear underneath that. So being able to really slow down, process what that actually is, so we can find ways to address that works for both partners, so that's kind of a lot of what I do with my clients, really being able to kind of break that down, see where it's coming from and figure out a way to address it that will meet the needs for both people. I hope that answers your question. Okay, any more questions? Okay, it would be really helpful if everybody could complete our feedback form. That just kind of gives us more information on, what topics that we can kind of bring up in the next couple months or whenever everybody can join us again. So that would be really helpful. Again, my name is Talia Laredo. I am a couples counselor and sex therapist here at Edens. I graduated in December of 2023 with my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I've been working with couples for about 2 years now. It's very meaningful work. Really enjoy getting to see people kind of change and self-reflect in pursuit of love for one another. So that's really meaningful work that I do. I'm also a certified sex therapist. I got certified through the National Sex Therapy Institute, and that's just because I wanted to address my clients' emotional and physical needs. So that's just a little bit about me. You can feel free to email me at Talia@Edens Counseling if you have any questions, or you can book a consultation or an appointment with Edens Counseling at our phone number, or you can also go online to our website and you can find more information there if you're looking for any type of therapy services.